Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So I have the pleasure of speaking with Rafi today. How are you, Rafi?
I'm good. How are you, Mario?
Yeah, I'm well. It's gotten a bit colder here. I thought it was going to be more like spring, but anyway, there's an old saying. It was J.P. Morgan who said it at the Peugeot hearings back in 1912 in Congress. When he was asked what gold was, he said, "Well, gold is money. Everything else is credit." And with that, I wanted to ask you because you recently wrote in your newsletter in Seeking Alpha, the End Game Investor newsletter, and I recommend viewers check this newsletter out. Is a very good deal, I think, for just over $200 a year, and you get updates regularly from Rafi. Yeah, you spoke about the myth of a reserve currency. Could you extend or expand on that and what it means and how people should really look at all the talk that we're seeing about the BRICS reserve currency, gold back to yuan and whatever.
hmm Well, there is a reserve currency. It is a thing, but it's not like some category that has to be filled. Like there has to be gravity, or there has to be like the weak nuclear force or the strong nuclear force in atoms or something. Or it's not like a fundamental law of economics that there has to be a reserve currency. There's just there tends to be an exchange medium that most people in the world use. So, and then if most people in the world use it, then most people are going to store it as a money because it's the most useful. So if you're going to ask me if you're going to be traveling to any country in the world, what's the best currency to have and what would you be able to get the most stuff with? I'd say the dollar because most people use it. So that's what makes it the reserve currency. What I was talking about, the myth is that there won't be a new reserve currency. It's not like any currency that currently exists now in the world can replace the dollar as a currency, right? Because if you go back to the pyramid, right, the Extra's pyramid, or we could rename it to our own pyramid since it's more complicated now than when Extra talked about it. Everything derives from something else. There is an origination money. There's an origination value that everything else derives from, which we call derivatives. But the dollar itself is also a derivative because it came into existence as a derivative of gold, right? So every other currency, because of the way Bretton Woods was structured, and this was intentional, when the United States won World War II and basically said, look, instead of holding gold, you're going to hold dollars. And then if you want to get gold, you can redeem dollars for gold at $35 an ounce. That was the way that they were able to print more dollars for themselves and spend it on stuff. And that's how America got so crazy rich, right? By printing out money that they could print whenever they wanted and take stuff from the rest of the world. And then the rest of the world got wise to it, so it started saying, okay, we want our gold. And then, Nixon said, oh, no more. That's it. We're done. But but since every other currency, because of the Bretton Woods structure, was structured with the dollar as the reserve behind that currency, it's not like any other currency today can replace the dollar and say, oh, the dollar is dead. Which currency is next? There's none of them. They're all going to die. The only way to get beyond the dollar is to go beneath it in the pyramid, and beneath the dollar is gold, and some say below gold is silver. I'm not sure about that. Maybe doesn't really matter. Have gold and silver in case, and that's what I would say.
Make sure you check out Miles Franklin. They have a special promotion on 2022 silver maple leaf coins. They're only $3.40 over spot. If you're interested, email them at info@milesfranklin.com or call them on 1-800-822-8080 and mention Monaco 64 as well if you do so.
But yeah, you were showing this chart of previous reserve currencies, right? Since like 1492, or that's a
Oh yeah,
famous.
let's bring that
Yeah.
up.
Okay, so this is it's an interesting little tidbit of history that yes, during certain periods of time there were countries that were more powerful than other countries, right? But they didn't. It's not really that they had a reserve currency. It's that they had gold substitutes, and in the 1400s, Portugal was the most powerful country, and its gold substitute was the most used because the Portuguese were in the most places in the world. And then Spain overtook Portugal and its gold substitute. But the point is that all of these things were gold substitutes, all of them, right? And some of them were used more, and some of them were used less. So usually, the most powerful empire had its currency used, and what they would do is they would inflate it just like any other empire does, and then eventually they inflate it enough that they collapse. Happens every time. It's happening now. It's just much bigger now. That's all that's happening.
So yeah, you mentioned that like if you look here, I'm gonna share it as well. Can you see it here? The Chinese money supply.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you
See
go
it.
over that a little bit?
Oh, okay. So there was this article that came out. I saw it on Zero Hedge. It was linked for something else about Iraq using changing to the yuan to settle oil trades, and then the whole gold silver bug community goes, "Wow, more abandoning the dollar. This is really gonna. This is so important." And I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying it's nothing. It's something. It's a good sign. It's more of a sign of dollar abandonment, but it's not really dollar abandonment because what's the yuan, right? The yuan is just another dollar substitute because the yuan and the dollar are locked in at certain exchange rates controlled by the People's Bank of China. So the PBOC doesn't want the dollar yuan exchange rate to go out certain windows. So they model their monetary policy after the Fed. And the yuan is much more inflated than the dollar. If you look at the money supply of the yuan since 2008, it's gone up, I think, 6 times, I wrote, versus the dollar, which has gone up 3 or 4, maybe 3, something like that. And behind the yuan is $3 trillion in treasuries. So it's not like there's one pyramid here. It's not like there's a yuan pyramid and there's a dollar pyramid, and when the dollar pyramid collapses, you can go to the yuan pyramid. The yuan pyramid is part of the dollar pyramid. It's all one pyramid, right? So when the dollar collapses, the yuan goes too. That's it.
Yeah, that's right. So what you really want to have when this pyramid collapses is really the gold and silver underneath it, right?
Yeah. You got to go underneath the dollar in order to save your purchasing power. You can't go above it. It doesn't make sense.
And what do you say to people who are frustrated? They see the price moves, and especially silver is still like around $21, and also gold. We saw it recently move up to almost 2,000. Now it's back to like 1820. Yeah, I know it's frustrating, and I've been exchanging fiat currency for real money since 2002, and I can tell you that there are periods that are frustrating, but over the long term, I would say it's not even a prediction, but more like it's just like
The law. It's a law of nature. So, yeah.
that's right. It's just like you have the sun come up, every day. This is gonna happen. So anything you want to tell the viewers how to approach this?
Okay. Well, how to approach frustration? Well, I'll give a historical example, and then I'll give an Aikido. The sort of martial arts where you use your opponent's energy against himself and reflect it. But there was a point in, I think, 1922, maybe 1921, 1922 in Weimar, where gold was really tanking about 30-40%, because the government, the Weimar government, decided to sell some of its gold reserves to support the mark. And at that time, I thought they'd solved the problem, but they just sold their gold reserves, and then it was a setup for the hyperinflation in 1923. So I'm sure gold and silver hoarders back then in 1923 in Germany were very frustrated then too, but it didn't last long. Okay, so how do you approach frustration? Approach it as a useful tool. Like in this process, you're gonna feel elation, you're gonna feel greed, you're gonna feel fear, you're gonna feel frustration. You'll feel all these things. That's not gonna stop until the end game. And the end game, I think, is going to be the next printing round. People could argue it's going to be in 2 printing rounds. I think it's going to be in 1. I'm not like married to that opinion. If it's going to be 2, it's going to be 2. But I happen to think it's going to be 1 more. But so when you feel frustration, that's fine. That's when you should be buying. right? You should use your emotions to plot your buying, right? If you feel greedy and really happy and like, look at my gains in my portfolio, I'm doing so well, I'm such a genius gold bug, that's when you should not be buying, right? That's when you should have enough that if the end game comes, that you'll be okay, and you'll be okay, good, I bought enough, I'm good. But when you're frustrated, that's when you should be buying.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The best times I've bought gold are usually when the markets are really negative and the prices have been beaten down, and it takes a bit of courage, I guess, to go there and buy the gold and silver. But what you have to remember, actually, you don't need courage. What the courage you need is to sell your gold and get into fiat. I would say you need to have a lot more courage to do that. And you were talking about the next round, that they will inflate even more, and I agree with you. Because if you look at history, for example, during the period of the French Revolution, when they were issuing assignats, they started around 1792, and they said, "Oh, we're just going to issue so many livres of assignats, and then we're going to stop when the economy picks up." And then after every issue, the economy would slow down, and they'd say, "Oh, let's just do a little more." And every time it was bigger. And this is what it seems to me here. This is like when the Fed does its QE. This is what it did uh, during the '08 crisis. And this is what it did in the last crisis here. And I think in the next crisis, this here in the '08 crisis, is going to look like a blip. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, if you look at the money supply, this is a little bit misleading with the balance sheet, because it doesn't show you what's going on with the money supply. But in 2008, the printing that they did didn't really affect the money supply at all, because the printing it was padding something in the basement, in the dungeons, that we didn't see in the money supply. It was they were buying commercial paper and then putting it on our balance sheet, and then trying to help the banks, with their own balance sheets. But in terms of money that people could spend, it wasn't much. Right? But now the basement is full. Like the dungeons are full. You have all these. Was it like $3 trillion of extra reserves in M2? Right. See, it's full. There's nothing you can't. There's nothing else to do. I think that's M1, right?
Yeah,
So
I've got M2 here as well.
yeah.
So
So M2 M1, they made like they changed the definition of M1, so that's where that big vertical line comes from. That's just that's not really a vertical move. It's more just a redefining of what M1 is. So I think it has to do with savings accounts. They counted savings accounts as M2, and now it's M1, but whatever. So yeah, you saw for a brief moment in 2020, the M2 went vertical, whereas in 2008 it didn't really. It just continued on its trajectory. But there's too much reserves now. They can't really add anything there. So all the money printing is going to have to go to the surface, right, to what you can see, and that's going to be the next round, and that is going to affect gold and silver pretty immediately. And there is a chance, and I believe it's a good chance, that the next printing round will be the end game within a matter of months after it starts. I don't know that for sure. I don't. That's just how I'm preparing myself.
yeah, and it seems like now the markets have kind of increased the chance that the Fed might keep hiking for a little longer. That's why we're seeing yields go up and stocks come off as well. Have you got like a time frame for when the Fed will have to come in again? I mean, we're seeing the Bank of Japan. They did like $150 billion of QE back in, I think it was January. And now they're starting to have to do a little more QE to keep the rate under 50 basis points.
I don't know exactly. I don't really have a trigger point. I can't. I would be very surprised if we lasted the rest of the year without it. I think it's got to be this year, and there could be a lot of trigger points. There could be Russia invading Ukraine, and then the Fed saying, "Oh, well, we have to print now," whatever, or it could be a central bank losing control of its peg. It could be Japan. It could be some bank fails, Deutsche Bank or Credit Suisse or something. It's something. I mean, even in Israel, actually, we're actually threatened with what look it's going to be a serious authority fight, or how do you say, a power struggle between the Supreme Court and the Parliament here in the Knesset. It looks to be coming to a head in April, and there could be violence in the streets here. I don't know. I mean, everything is unstable because the Parliament is passing a law to limit the powers of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is threatening to knock it down. And if they do that, like, there's no constitution here, so well, where do the tanks side? I don't know. That's why I'm out of the way.
Yeah, so yeah, it seems like it's a good time to batten down the hatches, to keep squirreling away real money. That's what John Titus. I had him on the other day, and he said, "Yeah, you have to try to squirrel away your money, keep it away from the system," because he said there's no rule of law anymore anyway. So, Rafi, any final words to the viewers, and maybe tell them where they can find your work, and where you post stuff as well?
Yeah, well, final word, use your emotions to guide you and don't take them all too seriously. Whatever you feel, let yourself feel it and let it go through you and over you and done with it. And then you should be able to think clearly after it's gone. Because reality doesn't change. Your emotions change all the time. Reality doesn't change. And this is the reality. This is going to happen exactly when we don't know. Where you can find me, if you search the Endgame Investor on any search engine, you'll find it. And I write 3 or 4 times a week with a longer weekend report. And you can find my YouTube channel, Rafi Farber. You can come my Patreon on Patreon, where I give a weekly biblical commentary on these topics, so you can get an idea of what people and governments are doing 3,000 years ago, which is, kind of helpful.
Yeah, and it seems like things never change. It's like they repeat. So thank you, Rafi, and have a good Shabbat. Is that right?
Yes, have a good weekend. Shabbat. Yeah,
Thank you. Take care.
you too.